Sorry, we weren't recording, so we'll start that one more time. We're gonna call the March 8th MWPA Ops meeting to order at 10:06, and we'll start with a roll call.
Thank you, sir. Starting with the town of Fairfax, Heather Abrams.
Here.
For Kentfield Fire District, Mark Comey.
Here.
For Marinwood Community Services District, Eric Drakeson.
Here.
For the town of Corte Madera, Adam Wolf.
Here.
For Novato Fire, Bill Tyler.
Here.
For Southern Marin Fire, Chris Tubbs.
Here.
For the Bolinas Fire District, George Krakauer.
Here.
For Marin County Fire Department, Jason Weber. And I do believe we received a communication that Weber will not be here with us today. For the city of Larkspur, Dan Schwartz. And we do see you over in the audience, Dan. For the city of San Rafael, Chief Darren White. Not here today. For the town of Ross, Krista Johnson.
Present.
For the Inverness Public Utilities District, Jim Fox.
Here.
For Muir Beach Community Services District, Chris Gove. Not here. For the city of Mill Valley, Todd Cusiamano. And he will not be with us today. For the town of San Anselmo, Dave Donnery.
Here.
For Sleepy Hollow, Dan Mahoney. And for Stinson Beach Fire District Chair, Jesse Perry.
Here.
And I do believe we have a quorum, sir.
Thank you, Martina. We'll move on to item number 3, agenda adjustments. Any requests to adjust the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move forward. Item 4, public comments. We're going to open the time for public comments, opportunity for members of the public to comment on items not on the agenda. Martina, are there any members of the public wishing to speak?
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak at this time on the current agenda item, the open time for public expression, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, it does not appear that we have any hands for public comment.
All right, moving along to number 5, planning and program managers report. We'll hear from Ann Krelock.
Great, thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen here. Great, hopefully you can see this slide. I'm going to keep this short this morning because we have a lot of material to get through today. A few items. We, as you know, released an RFP for GIS services, and that solicitation closed. We received 6 proposals. We're really excited about these proposals. They're from some great firms. We are in the process of reviewing them internally, and then the team plans on meeting with a subset of those 6 firms to hear more about their proposals and potential costs and ask some questions. We'll have more updates on that in April. We circulated also a questionnaire for vegetation management contractors, and this was to create a list of pre-qualified contractors. This process is an optional process to make it easier and faster to contract for vegetation management. We've extended the deadline for contractors to submit their information until March 10th, 5 p.m. We have around 19 or 20 responses so far, so we're doing pretty well. We feel really good about this process. It'll be a good streamlining tool for member agencies who would like to contract for core projects through this process. And then the last thing I'd like to note is that we have a field trip coming up. As you know, we like to invite the public out to project sites to discuss what's happening on the ground and really see it for themselves. Our next field trip is co-hosted by the MWPA, Marin County Fire, and the ESP Partnership, the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership. We plan on hosting that on March 28th, weather allowing. at 10 a.m. and we'll be putting out more details on this topic coming up in the next week or so. And that's it for me. Happy to take any questions.
We'll open up for questions from any of the members of the committee. Seeing none, we'll go out to the public.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item, the Planning and Program Manager's Report, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. And sir, there are no hands for public comment.
Thank you for that, Ann. Moving on to item number 6, the consent calendar. We'll open the floor to public comment on the consent calendar before we make a motion on the minutes.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the consent calendar item, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining by phone, and sir, there is no one for public comment.
Any requests for edits from the committee members? If not, can we have a motion to pass last meeting's minutes?
So moved.
First by Chief Tubbs,
I'll second.
second by Chief Pomey. Thank you. Martina, can you pull the board?
And that is a motion by Chief Tubbs with a second by Chief Pomey to approve the minutes of the February 8th, 2023 Operations Committee meeting, starting with the Town of Fairfax. Heather Abrams.
Aye.
For Kentfield Fire District, Mark Pomey.
Aye.
For the Marinwood Community Services District, Eric Drakeson.
Yes.
For the Town of Corte Madera, Adam Wolf.
Yes.
For Novato Fire, Bill Tyler.
Yes.
For Southern Marin Fire, Chris Tubbs.
Aye.
For the Bolinas Fire District, George Krakauer.
Yes.
For the Marin County Fire Department, Jason Weber. He's still currently absent. For the City of Larkspur, Dan Schwartz. Oh, and my apologies. He will be
Yeah,
observing.
I can't vote actually. So
Thank you, sir. For the City of San Rafael, Darren White. Absent. And for the Town of Ross, Krista Johnson.
Yes.
For the Inverness Public Utilities District, Jim Fox.
Yes.
For the Muir Beach Community Services District, Chris Gove. He's absent today. For the City of Mill Valley, Todd Cusimano. Also absent. For the Town of San Anselmo, Dave Donnery.
Aye.
For the town, for Sleepy Hollow, Dan Mahoney. Okay, and for the Stinson Beach for the Stinson Beach Fire District, Chair Perry.
Yes.
And we do have it looks like we have a unanimous vote of all in attendance who can vote.
Thank you. Moving on to number 7, discussion items. We'll hear discussion items from Ann and Mark and some additional folks.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. Great, hopefully everyone can see this slide. So this item is going to take up the majority of our time today. This is a really exciting item to bring to the Operations Committee because it is an overview of where we are in terms of creating the work plan and budget, and then also a presentation of a number of different JPA-wide proposals. So proposals for the next work plan that would cover the entire JPA area. So today we're going to go over very briefly the overall process and milestones that we've reached and what the next steps are. We're going to talk about projected revenue and overall budget. And we're going to get a preview of these proposals that have been submitted to address JPA-wide needs. We'll have some time for questions and answers, and we'll include some Q&A time during the presentation, in between presentations as well. We don't actually need to take any actions today. This is just to listen and ask questions and kind of think through the JPA-wide proposals. We'll have additional follow-up, and the operations ad hoc subcommittee will also meet to review these proposals and discuss them in depth. Those are next steps. Operations Ad Hoc Subcommittee will be meeting. The ATC Ad Hoc Subcommittee has begun meeting and discussing JPA-wide proposals. All of the slides that you'll be seeing today will be available online in the coming days. We'll be attaching them to the agenda so that the public and anyone else can download them and view them. In the next month or so, we'll also be seeing a lot more member agency submittals for zone-specific projects or agency-specific projects. And the ATC Ad Hoc Subcommittee and Operations Ad Hoc Subcommittees will be meeting to discuss those as well. So this is an overview of our tasks and milestones and our calendar. This hasn't changed much, so you've seen this slide several times before. February is really about thinking through JPA-wide proposals and budget items so that we have a better idea for what the overall budget is going to look like for zone-specific projects, agency-specific projects. The month of March is really about looking at submitting proposals for, sorry, I see Chris Gove is trying to join. I'm going to ask Martina, would you mind sending Chris Gove the link again so that he can join a little bit late? Great. So March will be taking a look at the additional proposals coming in and thinking through budget and balancing all of those budget needs. The Operations Ad Hoc Subcommittee will become very key in all of these discussions. In the month of April, we'll be trying to finalize the work plan and budget. We'll meet one more time May 3rd as the Operations Committee to discuss the work plan and make sure we have a draft that we're comfortable moving forward to the board for consideration. And on May 18th, the Board of Directors will be considering the work plan and budget. The overall budget here assumes a 3% increase in response to cost of living adjustments to inflation, et cetera. The board will be considering this cost, this 3% increase, and we'll take a vote on it. So, but this table includes the assumption that we'll see a 3% increase in revenue for the MWPA for fiscal year 23-24. With that said, that gives us around 21 million for overall budget. The core budget is 60% of that. Administrative costs is 10% of the core budget. The core, after you subtract administrative costs, are reflected in the fourth row at 11, just over 11 million. And then 20% of that total revenue is dedicated to local projects, and 20% of that total revenue is dedicated to DSpace. And as we've done in previous years, and as is discussed as an option in the JPA language, 2% of that DSpace is allocated towards direct abatement. However, the Operations Committee can determine whether or not that's useful or if we want to forego that. Taking a look at kind of an overview of JPA-wide proposals that have been submitted for this next fiscal year. This table summarizes or just lists them. We're going to be taking a look at each of these proposals in more detail and generally in the order listed here. I've included 23-24 asks right next to 22-23 asks just as a comparison. So we're going to take a look at all of these proposals in more detail, but generally they include some public education proposals, including the peer-to-peer prepared and resilient community program that San Rafael has proposed, a wildfire education services and resources proposal from Fire Safe Marin, UC Cooperative Extension, additional time for this position to continue some work, evacuation, ingress, egress, risk assessment. This proposal is not asking for any additional funding, but did receive $350,000 last year. And I'm just including it here so that everyone is aware that this work is ongoing, but already funded. We have the risk assessment that you'll be hearing about today that will continue, assuming we have support for additional budget for it. This risk assessment is already underway, but has another phase to go. our public survey that's now called the Wildfire Risk Perception Survey was formerly known as kind of a knowledge and attitude survey. Phase 1 is largely complete, and we're asking for fiscal year 23-24 to cover phases 2 and 3. Additionally, there's a position here, Regional Wildfire Disaster Preparedness Coordinator included here, additional Chipper Day, another year of Chipper Day program, another year of our community residential grant program for home hardening defensible space, an additional garage door backup program for backup batteries. You'll hear about that later. Fireside subscription, Zone Haven subscription, MWPA operational costs, an additional line item for GIS services. So much of our work needs to be tracked and communicated with spatial data. And then a budget for environmental compliance that I'll talk about a little later. So this is the order for the presentations today. We've got a lot of speakers, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started with some of these presentations. This is the order that we're taking at the Advisory Technical Committee meeting last week. We went in the reverse order and we wanted to make sure to give everybody equal time. So we've reversed and put the public education first today to make sure that everyone has plenty of time to share their ideas and we have time to ask questions. I'm going to be asking the speakers to keep their presentations to 5 minutes and make sure to watch the clock while you're presenting because we have a lot to get through today. So the first speaker today is Quinn Gardner with San Rafael Fire, and she's going to be sharing the peer-to-peer prepared and resilient community outreach proposal. I'm hoping Quinn is ready to present.
Ready to go. Thanks, Anne, and thanks everybody. Appreciate the time. Before I dive into the solution that's kind of getting proposed, I just kind of want to summarize the challenge, which is how do we reach some folks with our education material that traditionally are harder to reach, either because of they're not native English speakers, they are not comfortable in the digital world, so they're not on social media, they don't receive e-newsletters, they don't watch YouTube, whatever the case may be, or just a disengagement or a mistrust of government. So during the COVID pandemic, this peer-to-peer and trusted messenger system became really critical to the success of testing vaccines and other public health outreach. And so this proposal really looks to build upon what has become this like tested method of educating local community members, providing them with stipends, and then having them be the educated voice out in the community where they can educate their neighbors at different community events, through their faith-based organizations, through their childcare facilities, et cetera. So however they know people, they can go and help spread this messaging. And the focuses here, of course, would be on evacuation, go bags, and getting more folks signed up for alerts. So this is a countywide proposal. Certainly coming from San Rafael, obviously the first thought is the canal, but this really is something we've seen across the board. And I think as you hear on some of the proposals later and some of the summaries on this initial attitude survey, there is a really large chunk of the population we're missing. And we kind of recognize everyone's at capacity. And so using our community members, right, as resources, I think is a great way to help bridge that gap and to get that information out there. So that's the super summary. The bulk of that funding would go towards stipends. So it is a scalable request, but it's a pretty small chunk of change per zone, if you will, to really be able to reach folks that are traditionally not quite as easy to reach and need some more targeted messaging approaches. So happy to take questions when the appropriate time.
Thank you, Quinn. We are going to move on to the next speaker, and then we will be including 5 minutes for questions afterwards. So the next speaker is Rich Shortall and Meg McCabe with Fire Safe Marin.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share the screen, please. And oops, share screen. Is it up? Okay, great. All right, so 5 minutes goes fast. So just pointing out that Fire Safe Marin is in a little bit unique position because it has been identified as a key outreach and education partner for the MWPA for wildfire preparedness. As everybody knows, we are really recognized, our programs really throughout the world. Wildfire agencies in California, other states, et cetera, use our materials, but at no extra cost to Marin residents. This year, if you've been following
Reed,
what we've
sorry,
done.
sorry to interrupt real quick. We got a loading screen on the screen if you're trying to present to us.
Oh, all right, it's showing. I have a share, it's not sharing?
No, it's sharing. We see it now. It's just when you go into the slideshow.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. Okay, we'll leave
That
it like
works.
this.
Thank you.
Okay, so zooming on here. So last year was really this last year's really been a big year where our material's been viewed close to 14 million times by Marin residents. And that's because our strategy has so many different channels of communication. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Meg for the next section here.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Meg McCabe. I'm Fire Safe Marin's Director of Programming. And Fire Safe Marin has been very intentional about the ways we grow and evaluate our programs and improve our program year after year. We looked up to reach and engagement, quality of content, and the responsiveness to residents' needs as the keys to effective outreach. And we look to the following data sources to gauge how we're doing and where we go next. So we keep a close eye on Google Analytics and individual platform metrics. We work through an extensive network of partner agencies, including community-based organizations throughout the county, also industries, schools, and 50,000 households of the FireWise network. We look at over 1,000 phone calls and receive and respond to emails every year for anecdotal information and really kind of gauge what kinds of questions is going on there. We have extensive interaction with the public. We also look at the data from our recent survey from the Godby research, which was a representative survey of Marin's baseline knowledge about wildfire risks and solutions that included 856 residents proportionally weighted. We are involved with and learning from the ongoing risk perception survey that you'll hear more about later. And the Chipper Day survey, we are engaged with advertising professionals to make sure that our paid advertising has state-of-the-art distribution and content. We look to industry experts and MWPA's peer literature review to guide our content as well. And then we are looking forward to incorporating more of the rich data from the home evaluation and the on-parcel risk analysis as well. We've always been paid close attention to prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of our programming. As Quinn mentioned, we are very aware of the importance of trusted networks as we engage with our community partners. We are paying very close attention to the access and functional needs community. Taking a note from the MWPA's literature review that points out that they are by far and away the most vulnerable during evacuations. And we're working with our FireWise and Marin SIL Powered and Prepared program to address some of those needs. All of our content is now, all of our core content is now delivered in bilingual in Spanish and in English, and we will continue to increase that and as we move forward. We have increased our in-person outreach in the community, and we're focusing a lot on the aging adults for the reasons I said above, working right now closely with Vivalon. We run all of our content through a peer review process that looks at accessibility of materials, and we have bilingual staff to help and work with MWPA and Marin County bilingual people to make sure that we were able to always address Spanish and English in all that we do.
So what we're proposing is a number of deliverable work products, which are going to be memorialized in a renewal of our existing contract with the MWPA. Our request this year is for $980,000, which is a reduction from last year. And I really want to point out that our small team works really hard as a unit to create and manage all these programs. I have to go through them quickly, but I really encourage you to look at the extensive documentation that we've provided in our submittal. So I'm just going to overview these kind of quickly. Website's really popular, 180, 200,000 visits a year. Put out a newsletter a month, 12,000 subscriber. We're really engaged in social media. Last month, we had 160 posts on social media. We put stuff out every day. Our video production is really high quality, and it's actually very state of the art, and it's carefully programmed to be effective with the public in terms of the length and content and so forth. And as Meg pointed out, we are working with consultants in the advertising industry to make sure that it is in fact effective. YouTube channel is really popular. A lot of people access that. You can't just stick a video up on YouTube and say done. You have to curate it in order to get engagement. Lots of public service announcements, whether it be in the IJ or in social media or other places we put it out. We maintain a huge cache of print materials, and we add to that constantly, including outdoor large signs and whatnot. As Meg pointed out, pretty much everything we have now is bilingual. Community partnerships are really important to us. For example, the community response teams that Quinn referred to, we work with them. We work with lots of different agencies. It's a long list of them. We also believe strongly it's the trusted resource that gets the message out to individual communities and really helps to make sure that we're addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Response to the public, this is no small thing. We get over 1,000 emails a year, over 500 telephone calls, and we respond same day pretty much to all of them. We work very closely with the MWPA to support their materials and messaging. We do professional training for organizations like California Landscapers, and we're looking to expand to that into contractors doing home hardening. We support the D-Space program in several ways, including providing training to them, and the home evaluation report connects directly to our website. And so we're actually making improvements to that. And then we manage the spring workshops, which is an opportunity for everyone to showcase all the great work they do. We turned that into a promotional video for MWPA. And I think Ember Stomp is self-explanatory. Bigger and better this year. Hope you're all going to be there. So it's a quick review of all these programs. It makes it sound like there's not much just making it all happen. Believe me, it's a huge amount of work to put this all out. In fact, I remember when we made our first proposal to MWPA 3 years ago, I was told by several people on the board, I don't think you're going to be able to do all that stuff. And I think we've actually exceeded expectations. And you can find that every month in our comprehensive monthly reports, and our annual report is really extensive. We're very transparent. And if it makes it very clear the high return on investment you get from these educational dollars. I really do hope you'll be able to take the time to review the written submission that goes along with this to get the detail. Last slide I'll make really quickly. We have many measurements of success. I'm not going to go over all of them. They're kind of self-explanatory on here, but education is really part of this multi-program campaign that we're all doing. Home evaluation, surveys, community engagement, documentation of action by residents, and so forth. This is one part of that big picture of wildfire preparedness. You can't view any of it in isolation. And so, as I say, we have lots of different ways that we measure the success of the program, and we report out on those on a regular basis. And with that, my presentation is concluded.
Thank you so much, Rich and Meg. Our next presenters will be Sophia Porter with UC Cooperative Extension, joined by David Lewis.
Good morning, Operations Committee. I'll start, and I want to thank you all for this opportunity to be before you. UC Cooperative Extension continues to be grateful to be Marin County's connection back to the University of California. We've been here over 100 years. Sophia will be sharing with you our Fire Smart Landscaping program and activities that we've accomplished, what we're currently doing, and what we're planning for the future. But I first just really want to point out that Fire Smart Landscaping brings our horticultural expertise to homeowners, to home gardeners, meets them where they are with the interest of their landscape, and helps them achieve multiple integrated objectives that include defensible space, biodiversity, water quality, and other objectives. And as I turn things over to Sophia, I also want to point out that our Fire Smart Landscaping program is coordinated, integrated with our other efforts that take us from the front door to the ridge top. We work closely in the working and wildlands as well as on the private home gardens. A couple of examples include our efforts and ongoing training to build back prescribed burn associations, to reintroduce prescribed fire in a larger, more coordinated way. We also are active and key partners in the Agricultural Pass program, supporting Marin's farmers and ranchers during time of evacuation. So with that, we're here today to focus on the Fire Smart Landscaping program, and I'll turn it over to Sophia Porter.
Thank you, David, for that introduction. And as stated, I'm Sophia. I'm the FSL coordinator with the Cooperative Extension. I work very closely with our Marin Master Gardeners and the rest of the FSL team. Just as a backdrop, David mentioned a lot of things, but the Cooperative Extension and the Marin Master Gardeners therein are really the go-to sources for research-based science information, bridging science and the community via education outreach and etc. And then that content is picked up and then shared and amplified and broadening the reach with a lot of our other partners. This is really germane to the Community Wildfire Protection Plan and forming partnerships, again, to deliver on those goals. For example, the Cooperative Extension, the FSL team contributed to the ESP guidelines when they were being formed. And as the coordinator, I support those continued activities and efforts throughout the various programs. So just to touch upon some of the highlights of 2022, it was the first year that FSL was explicitly included in the new Master Gardener training. This is an intense 18-week training for our Master Gardeners, about 40 individuals per cohort. And then it was also saw the launch of a new Spanish video created with partnership with Fire Safe Marin. So we have a robust, we have a presence of FSL information online via social media and website, and we're continuing to build on that. So here are more ways we are educating the public via public speaking and I'll say digital print media, emphasizing not only defensible space, but things that are water-wise, pollinator friendly, ecologically sound. And that weekly Master Gardener column of the Marin IJ is one of the most popular columns in the newspaper. And there's an example of an article that just was published this past weekend, hiding FSL information. And again, this content is picked up and shared amongst other partners. So demonstration gardens, of course, Ember Stomp, spearheaded by Fire Safe Marin. And last year, the FSL team participated by creating a garden for the event, combined efforts with donations from suppliers and designers and other volunteers bringing that project to life. And right around the corner, the Master Gardeners were at the Marin County Fair when it opened up again after COVID, and that demonstration garden had an FSL component as well. Similarly, myself and other colleagues have offered advice and consultation with other landscaping projects in the county headed by other agencies in Santa Fe and Novato. There you can see a picture of us on the Terra Linda Road median when it was under advisement. And looping back again to that concept, the partnership, we offer educational support to workforce development programs like that going on with the Fire Foundry, with ESP and others, and also defensible space inspector training. Now, the FSL team of Master Gardeners are really dialed in with their outreach and external facing education, but also looking with within the organization with over 350 volunteers and touch points in the community, offering advanced training and infusing FSL into the other programs and really growing capacity. Something we're excited about on the horizon is a youth fire education program, or what we call Y-Fire in-house. It's an engaging and experiential learning program, educating our youth on being fire wise and fire prepared. And again, incorporating FSL in an existing bilingual landscaper training program. It's a 9-week program. Currently, there's 1 unit on FSL information. And that really looking ahead, really want to build off of that landscaper training program and be more specialized and deeper, doing a deeper dive, both pre and post fire training, and then really shoring up and refining a lot of the other activities I mentioned for further development and growth and partnerships, continuing educational support, refining that youth program, and maybe launching off of that to do an adult program that parallels it. Again, our FSL team of Master Gardeners are really great. Advanced training, increasing those touch points and those force multipliers in the community. And again, also with partnerships, developing partnerships for demonstration gardens throughout the county as well. I think I'm going to turn it back to David to go over the budget.
So with that, we'll wrap up and just briefly explain our budget asks for the coming work plan and coming fiscal year. And thank you for consideration of this request and our proposal as submitted. We're asking for 4 additional months of support that would complement a similar consideration of a no-cost extension from the original 2-year award and agreement. That no-cost extension stems from a delay in starting the project until December of 2020. It gives us about 5 months of a budget salary savings. We can now extend that for a good 8 months into the new fiscal year. And to make the fiscal year work plan complete for us, we're requesting that 4 additional months of support. With that, we thank you again to the Operations Committee, to the Wildfire Prevention Authority, to Mark and Ann for the continued opportunity to partner and bring UC Cooperative Extension Marin's complementary role in research and extension.
Thank you so much for that presentation. So we've just completed the first 3 presentations of the 10 that we're going to hear today. And so I'd like to take a few minutes to address any questions, perhaps around 5 minutes, and then we'll get started with the next group of presentations. So if there are any questions within the, yes, I see Bill Tyler.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Quinn regarding the peer-to-peer. Quinn, we're active up here in our CRT, and it's done, great work trying to pull together the various groups in order to get those trusted communication pathways open. I'm wondering, with all of the materials that FireSafe Marin has done, all the different programs in Spanish as well as English, whether or not perhaps before we throw additional funds, that we don't try and do a better job of getting the existing content out through those channels. And there may be sort of a bottleneck there. I'm wondering, do you feel that through your CRT group, which I assume you have the most experience with, are they successfully getting those materials out to those trusted sources? Or why do you think we need additional funding to do that?
Yeah, thanks, Chief. That's a great question. So I think that they are complementary efforts. I think the material that FireSafe Marin has produced is excellent and would go out this way in a lot of ways. I think that what we're trying to do here is kind of build on, and some of this stems from the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion group I'm part of through the CRT, which is not just the San Rafael CRT, the JEDI group is countywide. And just the discussions about kind of where we're missing folks. And I think a couple things that are important to knowledge is FireSafe Marin has had an amazing online presence, and the digital content is, like Rich mentioned, like the quality of videos is just outstanding, but not everybody's getting that digital content. And so we have to get out in person. And I think we've all acknowledged our capacity to do that is just really limited. FireSafe Marin included, our own team included, right? We just can't be at every event. And so creating these peer trained folks to be at those events is huge, and to supplement staff for very minimal costs. And I think the other piece is recognizing that Spanish is not the only language we need to be putting this material into. Vietnamese is huge. We have a lot of non-written languages and other native languages. And so again, we don't have to translate material into 5, 10, 15 different languages if we're training people that are bilingual in English and a native language that can then be that messenger to the native. So I think it's actually a big resource savings in that sense, because we don't have to go through multiple forms of translation work. And the folks that speak that language natively can make it culturally appropriate, can translate correct terms, right, rather than those other kind of layers. So I think it's a complementary effort. I'd want to work very closely with FireSafe Marin in terms of how we do that train the trainer program, but really look at, and we're creating local advocates, which is where the CRT was really successful. So I want to be clear that this isn't necessarily a mission of the CRT. It's looking at the model the CRT used which was creating local advocates, stipending folks to be out and to talk about, in that case, COVID, and now to be out talking about wildfire safety. And I want to replicate that process with the materials that we have across the county, largely coming from Fire Safe Marin as well as our local entities.
So would the $200,000 go towards training the trainers, and are these volunteers then? Or are you suggesting that they need to be paid to be out delivering the messages?
Yeah, so it would go towards creating the training program, but most of it is towards stipends. So the way we've seen a lot of success with that, right? Because fundamentally, most of the folks we're asking to do this are marginalized in some way. And so you're creating very modest stipends to say, spend 2 to 4 hours a week, or we're going to give you maybe a couple $100 to attend this 4 to 6 hour, maybe we're at a food bank distribution or a health clinic or something like that. And we're going to pay you to be there because you're taking time away from your family and your other income sources. So it's a big equity initiative in that regard, but that we've created. My initial was to train around 60 folks, averaging about 40 to 60 hours each. We could train less people, they could do more hours, right? There's flexibility within that. But that also helps reach folks out at the ranches is a big one. And I think some of that's going to come up with the surveying and the attitude studies. But to reach folks in these populations that we just don't have those connections with, or our trusted messengers and communities do.
Okay, thank you. I have another question for a different program, but I'll stand down until somebody else asks.
We have maybe 1 or 2 minutes left for questions, and then we should probably go out to the public to see if there are any questions there as well.
Bill, go ahead with your question.
Okay, this was just for the master gardeners. Is there a way that you can share or report out on the work that you guys are doing by zone so that we know that there's a proportional distribution of your work?
Chief Tyler, I will only say today that yes, the short answer is yes. We would then look into where we've given talks and participants and the ways in which we track participants in our education program. I will say all 350 volunteers come from they are distributed across all 5 zones. They work and live in all of the communities and in all of the zones that the Wildfire Prevention Authority is working to collaborate on.
Thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? Chief Tubbs.
Thanks, Jesse. It's a question for Quinn. Quinn, did I understand that you said that there were some analytics associated with your proposal? And if so, selfishly asking if we could get those for Southern Marin, we'd be interested in knowing where maybe some of our target audiences are.
I think Josh is going to present some of that for you later, but I was able to chat with him a little bit over the past couple of weeks about the initial findings of the surveying and the focus groups, and that helped. So I think that data is out there. It's not mine to give, but I think it's really helpful. And that was kind of honestly that conversation and recognizing some of these gaps I think we've had over the past couple of years, right? We hit the biggest reachable audience, and we know inherently as we try to reach the harder to reach audience, we're going to have to spend more time and more money. And so that's where this investment I think is. And I think Josh's research from this year and then going into next year will help inform that even more.
Yeah, and I think that the benefit would extend beyond just the services we provide through MWPA, but as we provide them as public agencies across our different jurisdictional areas. Thank you for that. And then I guess just a follow-up question for Mark, and I appreciate the approach with the DEI. I think we're all working through those issues in our individual agencies. And Mark, I'm just curious, and maybe I've missed it, as the board set out sort of any specific policy objectives around DEI which we could measure against?
When it comes to our purchasing procurement policy, we have clear DEI objectives for our purchases, but how we deliver our product, whether it's public education, vegetation management, DSpace inspections, we are relying on the Wildfire Risk Perception Survey to give us where we are, where our holes or gaps are with our DEI initiatives, and use that to formulate our policy towards DEI.
Any other quick questions from the committee? Okay, we'll go out to the public.
If there are any members of the public wishing to comment on the first several speakers for today's group of presentations, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. And sir, we do not have any hands for public comment.
Thank you, Martina. Thank you to all the speakers so far. And as a reminder, let's try and keep the presentations down to 5 minutes for respect of the other presentations time. We'll turn it back over to Ann.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone in the first group of speakers. We have 2 more speakers coming up next for the to discuss the on-parcel risk assessment study. That is Scott Farley with Willow Labs, followed by Josh Diamond or Dimon. Josh, maybe you can help me with your last name. I think I mispronounce it on a daily basis. With UC Berkeley Disaster Labs, he's going to be talking about the wildfire risk perception survey.
Hey, good morning and thank you. So as I'm sure y'all are aware, the DSI program has been enormously successful in collecting very granular and very extensive data about on-parcel hazards. Between 2020 and 2022, that's over 350,000 geolocated records of over 100 different types of potential wildfire hazard. So the objective of this study is to look at creating a relative hazard score for each one of those geolocated records so that we can do things like track risk over time, we can rank risks on a particular parcel, and that we can just generally improve programming, target it where it needs to be targeted. So for example, on a particular parcel, being able to look at what is most pressing, what can wait until later, and what may add a bit of resiliency to that parcel. So very briefly on methodology here, the way that we do this is that we take the location and type of discovery and combine that with parcel-specific environmental data, fuel moisture, wind speed, wind direction, and things of that nature, and then run that through a suite of 4 different fire behavior hazard models, which each look at a different way that that particular discovery may affect parcel and community safety to come up with a discovery level score that then can be aggregated to parcel level scores and also be used to perform some higher level analytics. In addition, we're using data from the MWPA grant program to look at what we're calling efficiency, which is essentially risk reduction value per dollar spent. So these component models, there's 4 of them. First one is looking at vegetation and looking at potential fire behavior and the potential given distance away from a structure for that discovery to impact a structure with radiant heat or direct flame contact. Second, looking at ember transport. So using a physical ember simulation model to track an ember's trajectory through the plume of the fire and downwind to look not just at where embers are generated, but where they're deposited downwind. Turning to home hardening, we have a vulnerability model that looks at how past homes have performed in a wildfire using the CAL FIRE DINS data set. And this gives us the marginal contribution of a particular discovery, given all the other surveyed attributes on the structure. So for example, what is the marginal contribution of a wood roof, given that we also know that that structure has single pane windows and combustible siding. And then fourth, we have the continuity component. We know that there's a lot of really interesting, really high quality science out there that is on all sorts of heterogeneous formats, difficult to integrate. The continuity component uses a rubric that allows us to integrate these kinds of studies, particularly for small scale phenomenon like receptivity to embers and contribution to forward fire spread. So when we put all of these models together, generate this discovery score, we can look at not just where there are frequent issues, but where those frequent issues pose a significant degree of hazard across the JPA. So for example, fences, trellises, decks, others attachments, right, contribute the largest overall source of hazard because they're both very, very common and each instance poses a significant degree of hazard, followed by things like vegetation in the home ignition zone, other common ways of thinking about defensible space and home hardening. We can look at where the most hazard is concentrated. Potentially most interesting is that we can do this spatially because all this data is based on this geolocated record data set. And so we can look at where there's high hazard parcels, where there's low hazard parcels, and then use spatial statistics to look at statistically significant clusters and potentially do things like re-inspect or target geolocated risk mitigation campaigns in these high risk clusters, and then use low risk clusters to look at where there may be success stories or programs that are working that we can transfer towards other areas of the community. And we can really tailor those specific mitigation campaigns based on the issues that are experienced in each particular location. So for example, in the green here, we're seeing more of that hazard is coming from vegetation and defensible space discoveries. In the orange, more of that hazard is coming from home hardening and structural discoveries. So this kind of study has a very large application to many potential programming improvements, tracking risk through time so that as we do programs like this, we can understand their quantitative outcomes, creating parcel specific mitigation plans given those inspections, creating localized and targeted risk mitigation campaigns, and then combining this with census data, other data about who is being impacted to make sure that our programs really impact those that need it most in our underrepresented groups. So in 2022 and 2023, we produced scores for the existing data set up till the end of 2022, performed these spatial and statistical analyses and identified some of these potential programming applications. Our proposal for next year includes analytics for the upcoming inspection season, as well as some experiments to help validate this model and this approach, real-time integration with the resident report that they'll receive after their inspection, as well as integration and coordination with specific member agencies to make sure that these programming improvements are actually kind of have the opportunity to be made, as well as integration into existing modeling like that for the CWPP, as well as a creation of a story map that this can kind of be shared with the public. And finally, potentially an integration with the incident command software to understand how and whether this should be integrated into the experience a firefighter would have arriving on scene. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Scott. Josh, go ahead and share your screen and get started.
Thank you, Anne. Operations Committee. I'll share my screen real quick. So I'm going to go through this very quickly. There is some preliminary information data here, but I will put it up for display and leave it on the slide so it'll also be available. This is a multi-phase survey of wildfire risk perceptions, perceptions of access to public education resources, and access to the other sorts of programs that MWPA has been engaged in and will be continued to engage in moving forward. And that's the idea, and the idea is for it to be a completely representative survey of all populations of Marin as the JPA. We've been working on this. I've worked with Charlotte, Josh Hampshire, Andrea Salinas, Alina Benching, and Elaine Wilkinson. I've collaborated with these community partners as well in this co-design process, which I'll talk about a little bit for the sake of speed. The idea is to establish a survey across Marin that's inclusive, quantitative, and qualitative to provide a really effective and deep baseline of residents' understanding, perceptions of access to information, preparedness resources, things like the grant programs, DSpace, effectively what all of you are doing. To identify outstanding successes, to back up gut intuition, what many of you already have a feeling about where there might be gaps or where certain programs may be exceptionally successful, back that up with concrete evidence, both to support ongoing work, promote outside grant opportunities, and also ensure that MWPA is backing up all this information with track data. Learn things that we didn't understand, that we didn't know, particularly on the qualitative side of this work, track outcomes and programming. And of course, as Quinn was referencing, build partnerships with communities across Marin. And here it's really building up partnerships. These partnerships exist, and many of the previous presenters have already talked about this, but this is another way that this is building those integrations with community partners that really have pre-existing trust networks and connections and the expertise of working with communities across Marin. So this is part of an overall program that was approved by the MWPA board during last fiscal year. It was a 4-phase or 4-module program. Design phase was module 1, where it's building the partnerships. It's built as a co-design approach. So it's a participatory community survey that's at the level of co-design. So the community partners are ideally co-partners, co-owners of the survey process. And then there's a management and coordination over the whole process to ensure that it ends up becoming statistically representative and valid in that sense. Now we're moving on to, so we're wrapping up the design phase these couple months. We're finishing up focus groups this month, conducting analysis on our focus groups and our ad hoc semi-structured interviews over the next month or two, and then finalizing all of this in the coming months and building a survey frame from that in preparation for the next fiscal year. The implementation phase would start in July. We want to hit the ground running, so we're doing all of this legwork now to ensure that we have all of the components of the design ready to start pretty much July 1st. That involves ongoing negotiations and discussions with community partners, understanding what their capacities are, and building that into this program. The implementation phase will be this work here, and I'll go into that a little bit in 2 slides. These are just brief numbers. I won't talk about them due to time, but this is about where we're at with the number of focus groups, number of participants overall. Overall, with our interviews and focus groups, we're hitting about 225 qualitative interviews and focus group participants as a result of this design phase. These are the highlights. I won't go into them because there's a lot of interesting stuff that can take a lot of time, but I wanted to put them up here for you all to look over. I can go back if there's questions or something, but they'll also be available. And what we're requesting for phase 2, module 2 and 3, the implementation and analysis of the actual survey is $198K. This is going to be to survey 2,000 residents across Marin, ensuring a area stratified random sampling frame, which builds inclusivity and ensures representation of all groups in Marin. Standard survey, online and telephone survey modules in the literature can tend to underrepresent various communities, particularly communities that either have access issues, access and functional needs, or communities of color. So this co-design process aims to specifically have co-partners in this as the community representatives who will then work through existing trust networks to ensure that residents are involved and responding to the survey. People will be compensated for their time, both responding to the survey. Our community partners' roles will be funded as a part of this proposal. The coverage of community partners across Marin, as most of you that work here are very familiar, is patchy and inconsistent. So we're looking to bring on a professional participatory community field survey team to fill in those gaps, coordinate field logistics, and augment the capacity of community partners where they may not have capacity, because capacity of smaller community-based organizations often increases at the level of an FTE, and it's not always easy to increase that capacity quickly. Contractor team time will be spent coordinating and managing overall survey, balancing the consistency and ensuring statistical validity, but balancing that with adaptability where there's survey fatigue or where community partners and the existing trust networks feel that there are better approaches of reaching residents. And then, of course, conducting the analysis and visualizing either through geostatistics, geodatabase, or an interactive dashboard of sorts. And of course, translation where that is needed and important in the process. And that is it.
Thank you so much, Josh and Scott. Let's take a pause here and take a few questions. We'll allot about 5 minutes for questions.
Not seeing any questions in the room. Any questions on Zoom? Okay, we'll move out to the public.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the last round of presentations, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. And sir, there are no hands for public comment.
Thank you to the last two presenters. We'll move on to the next one.
Great. Our next two, 3 presentations will include the Regional Wildfire Disaster Preparedness Coordinator proposal, and Tom Welch is going to help us out with that, followed by the Chipper Day program, and Steve Peters will be helping us out with that. The Resident Grant Program and Garage Door Backup Program will be presented by Maria Schmidt. So we can go ahead and get started on that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Welch. I serve as Deputy Chief of Operations for the Southern Marin Fire Protection District. And I want to thank the Operations Committee for hearing us today, as well as staff for supporting this presentation. First, I want to reset and remind the committee as to what we're doing here. This is a trial basis program to hire a coordinator to look over and coordinate for CERTs, NRG, and Get Ready programs throughout Marin County. It's a 2-year trial basis, and the MWPA has supported it with finances in the past. We're looking for a continuation of that and an increase. April 2024, the trial will end, and that makes it substantive for this discussion, as it'll be this coming fiscal year when the program will end without funding. We were trying to prove a concept that we could provide a service throughout the 101 corridor, as well as West Marin, that serves to increase the awareness of our constituency to a disaster. And just a little bit about who this person is reporting to. This person reports to, who is Elaine Wilkinson, reports to the Marin County Fire Chiefs Association, and they approve this the work plan for this project. They also approve and review the budget. The person works for Catherine Way's team on the PDEP, which is the working arm of DC3, so the Public Disaster Education and Preparedness Committee. The person also works and reports to the Marin Managers Association, as well as is in alignment with the MWPA. So the responsibilities include communications, and I would say communications and coordination, developing website, providing emails, coordination in those 3 buckets, CERT, NRG, and Get Ready. Through also partnerships, we have significant partnerships with other county NGO groups, including libraries, and all of our communications is equity-based and being converted into multiple languages. Creating and developing trusted partnerships. One partnership that I'd like to highlight is our partnership with high schools in creating the Teen CERT program. And that has been funded through grants and also this body, and will create CERT trained responders at all high schools throughout Marin. Community outreach and education. One thing I'd like to highlight there is we have our NRG, we do block captain training. So we're working with neighborhoods, boots on the ground in the neighborhoods, working hand in hand with people, as well as our CERT program is 2, which we have about 2,000 or so CERTs. Collaboration with regional coordinators. Of course, I've talked about energy and preparedness, and there's other NGOs throughout the county that we partner with. So the results of what we've done thus far is to, one, of course, meet people where they're at in their neighborhoods. We have delivered on a new website, Ready Marin, and that has been providing information for disaster response throughout the entire county, but it's also representative of the Fire Chiefs Association as well as the MWPA. We've established social media channels and providing engaging and relevant content, delivered resources and training in an equitable manner, focusing on at-risk and underserved populations along the 101 corridor, as well as our neighbors and friends in West Marin. Working on collaboration with the regional coordinators, many regional coordinators are employed to include the Ross Valley, Central Marin Fire, Kent, San Rafael, and Southern Marin, as well as out in West Marin. So working with them to coordinate different activities, once again, to meet people where they're at. And then proving to be a trusted and reliable resource for all districts. In fact, we've had a recent reach out from a community in Chile that suffered a horrible wildland fire, and they're using elements of our product to help educate and inform their community. So the budget requirements, as you can see in 2022, 2023, the program was supported to the tune of $138,000. It pulls funding from Measure C or MWPA. It also pulled funding from Marin County, other cities and towns. In 2023, 2024, because we are looking to make the program go to a more permanent status, which will require some roll-up costs into the salary and benefits. We're asking for an additional $100,000 or correction, $100,000 from Measure C, as well as $30,000 from Marin County. Towns and cities will see a bill of $17,700, and then we've secured some Shush Gap grant money at the tune of $50,000. And I'd just like to remind folks, we brought people along in this process, and the fact that we've reviewed this program with the Fire Chiefs Association in February of this year. And we have a pending review of this program with the city managers coming, I believe, next week. And of course, we're here to review it with you, and I will stand by for questions when appropriate.
Thank you so much, Chief Welch. The next presentation will be Steve Peters discussing the Chipper Day program. Steve, are you available?
Yeah, I'll share my screen now. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the time. I'm here to present the project proposal for the continuation of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority's Chipper Day program. So in the interest of time, I'll just include a very brief summary. The program is structured around curbside pickups to be used as an asset for Marin County residents to create defensible space and alleviate the costs associated with the disposal of vegetation removed from their properties. In past years, we've operated on a schedule that provides 2 scheduled pickups per season for all residents within the JPA. To date, we've removed almost 40,000 cubic yards of vegetation and serviced and completed 9,500 pickups. This program so far has been highly successful. Of the residents who have taken our post-chipping survey, 90% of the residents have given us 5 out of 5 stars for satisfaction and ease of use of the program. And 90% of survey takers have also said that the existence and advertisement of the free chipping has motivated them to create defensible space and home harden. In addition to the positive reviews that the program's received, we've received overwhelming calls for program expansion in additional pickups throughout the season, as well as more opportunities to share the program with residents who may not be familiar with it. The expansion of the program over the last few years has been shown in the number of first-time users. In just this past season, first-time users alone removed 3,600 cubic yards of material. We believe that that expansion will continue on into the future. So far, only 7.8% of the population within the JPA, or households, excuse me, within the JPA have utilized the program, meaning that there's a lot more room for expansion, and we intend to take advantage of that with multiple forms of advertisement, both digital and print. Finally, for 2023, to address the concerns made or the calls for more expansion of the program and diversifying the types of pickups. We've restructured the standard season schedule to rotate from one MWPA zone to another per week, which will result in 5 pickups, which is more than doubling our standard season pickup number. And that will mean that each resident will have a chipping event available roughly every 5 weeks, so that they can continue to create defensible space and maintain that space throughout the season, as opposed to doing 1 or maybe 2 large projects on their property throughout the season. And finally, we're looking to address properties that have larger vegetation needs than our standard piles will allow for. In doing so, we're planning to partner with the Fire Foundry to accommodate larger piles, 50 feet or larger. These will be done during specific events that will run in tandem with our standard scheduled pickups, so that standard season pickups won't be affected, but we can still address larger pile needs. And finally, we believe that we do not need a budget increase from last year, so we're asking for the same $1.25 million to accomplish this work. And then when it's appropriate, I will take questions as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Steve. Next, we're going to hear from Maria Schmidt, who will be discussing our resident grant programs.
Sharing my screen. Can you guys see that?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so I will be talking about the community grant program for the next fiscal year, as well as the battery backup program that we are proposing to begin next year as well. So the overall program goal is to
Maria, we lost your presentation. Are you able to reconnect?
I am. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. So the overall goal of the program is to assist residents with the cost of implementing defensible space, as well as the home hardening recommendations that are recommended during their defensible space inspections. And on this slide, it just kind of is giving a breakdown of kind of where we're at this current fiscal year. So on the left, you can see a breakdown of the spending by zone. So far, we've funded 356 applications, totaling a little over $618,000. As compared to last year, we funded 123 applications, totaling a little over $105,000. And this information is available to the member agencies through a couple of different options. We'll be sending out regular reports exported from SurveyMonkey to give you a little bit more information about the specific applications, but you're also able to export this data directly from Fireside by pulling all of the discoveries that have been resolved by grant in your jurisdiction. So this is an overview of the current application process for this fiscal year. It starts out with an inspection provided by the member agencies and then action taken by the resident. The resident can submit those receipts and photos and everything to us through the online application process or through a hard copy. And then that application comes to us and goes through a 2-step review process, first by MWPA staff, and then second by the member agency who performed the inspection. And then finally, if it's approved, it usually takes about 2 or 3 weeks for them to be reimbursed. And if they're declined, then we notify the applicant via email. So currently the application is open to all residents who have received a full defensible space inspection with the possible award of $1,000 for defensible space and $5,000 for home hardening work, with a 50% match required for all items except for the 4 listed here. 2 of the changes are highlighted on this slide. So we are looking to kind of scale back who the program, who this program is kind of geared towards by reinstating the access and functional needs next year, and by also taking the garage battery backup off of this eligibility list and putting that into a separate reimbursement process. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. So like I said, right now the program is open to everyone, but we would like to reinstate the access and functional need requirements. The exact criteria is kind of to be determined, and we're kind of looking for feedback from all of you on kind of what that will look like for next year and what you think is appropriate. But we think this will allow us to focus our funding where it's going to have the most impact, and will likely include low income and people over the age of 65. We'd also like to only fund the highest priority work on each applicant's report first, in order to kind of work on what's going to have the most risk mitigation. And then we want to give ourselves a little bit more flexibility next year by creating the option to provide direct assistance where needed, to kind of scale back and help residents that are struggling with the reimbursement barrier. As mentioned, we want to take the garage battery backup off the eligibility list, and this will be funded under a separate core reimbursement program. And we want to implement a per parcel cap to help our funds reach more residents. The amount is to be determined, but it'll probably be between $10,000 to $15,000. And then there will be a few policy changes next year. So first, we'd like to only fund work that has been completed within around a year of completion and was identified on their most recent defensible space report. That year may kind of turn into more of a 6-month or 9-month period. The kind of timeline is a little bit in the work right now. We want to make sure that we are providing grants to as many people as we can, while still making sure that we're having applicants submit their applications in a timely manner. And then we'd also want to have any work over $500 completed by a licensed contractor, and we will no longer be accepting cash receipts over $500. So this gives a breakdown of the proposed budget for next year. So we're looking for a total of $1 million, and this will be broken down into the categories shown here. So around $16,000 for our SurveyMonkey subscription and website updates, $75,000 for grant administration staff, and this will help us fund between 179 and 891 parcels. And then we'd also like to implement some more grant outreach materials and a mailing card campaign next year. And then our Spanish translation cost of all of those materials is going to be covered by FireSafe Marin. And then finally, this last slide just goes over a broad overview of the garage battery backup program. So we're hoping to provide Marin residents with $200 for the installation of a garage battery backup for their existing motorized garage openers. And this has a proposed budget of $10,000, which will include staff time, targeted advertising, and reimbursement for around 50 parcels next year. And that is it.
Thank you so much, Maria. We can take a few minutes for questions, and I want to thank all the speakers for doing such a great job keeping your presentations to 5 minutes. We'll take a few minutes to answer and consider questions, and then Mark and I will discuss operational costs and environmental compliance and a few other items.
Chief Tyler, go ahead. Chief, you're on mute.
Sorry. First one's for Tom. So Tom, for the disaster position, prior years, I believe the MWPA Measure C funding through the core was approximately 30% of the total costs. And my recollection was that we wanted to make sure that there was proportional work to the MWPA's mission with regards to fire prevention and mitigation. And so I'm just wondering if in any kind of measurable or reporting out, that distinction can be made, showing the amount of time, work, energy, product, et cetera, that goes specifically to fire mitigation and prevention. And then one of the differences that I see with the increase goes from going from 41,000 approximately of a $138,000 position goes to 100,000 of 197. And I realize that's for additional benefits for the person to make it a full-time, fully burdened position. But the cost that is now being asked of MWPA is now 50%, more than 50% of the total cost of the position. So are we to expect that half of the time that this person is going to be focused on wildfire prevention mitigation solely?
Excellent question, Chief Tyler. And we believe that this project that's being presented is in alignment with MWPA goal number 2, which is detection, alert, and evacuation. We also believe it is in alignment with MWPA goal number 4, which is public outreach and education. And I'll give you an anecdote. In the southern part of the county, we've been doing evacuation drills long before it was cool. And just last year, this project participated in over 15, whether we were helping our friends out on the coast, our friends along the 101, develop and or deliver on an evacuation drill. That's been a large body of work. And so although this is a pilot program and we have not conducted a workflow analysis, we are noting that an extensive amount of time is being spent on just that one item right there with evacuation. Also, every evacuation drill that we've done in the South has included our CERT partnerships, which is one of the main focuses of this position. And as of lately, learning from our Central Marin friends, the NRG component as well has been supportive. And then of course, coordinating other NGOs. And then just in your area, we have participated in Get Ready, which is a lighter version of CERT, but also serves to set our residents up for success. And we partnered with the Novato Police Department to do that. Additionally, you heard from one of the other people that there's survey work that's going on. And so we're assisting with various elements of that project, survey work with focus groups throughout Marin County. And so can I tell you definitively that that we've done a workflow analysis? We haven't. We've just noticed trends.
Okay. I think that there, obviously we've been supporting this from the inception, and I just think there could be a way that the position works even more closely with Firewise communities to integrate that, block captain concept, which gets into the NRGs with more focus, with more percentage of their time integrated there. And so that's the kind of thing I think would help really demonstrate the benefit to MWPA. So that's just a comment.
Well taken.
Yeah, and then I do have follow-up questions for others, but I'll yield time for the other questions now.
We'll go out to Dan with this question.
More of a comment. I just wanted to echo Bill's point. I think, this organization is now reaching a point where every dollar is up for competition and there's more need than dollars. And I'm a little uncomfortable with the appearance that MWPA is picking up the lion's share of anything without clear justification that it's returning the lion's share of the proportional share of the benefit. So I would encourage there be a workflow analysis done, at least as an audit, if this is a pilot, at least as an audit at the end of year 1, to see that the investment from MWPA is proportionate to the return to the taxpayer.
Understood. Thank you.
We'll go with the question here.
Thank you. This is Krista, Town of Ross. Just a general question regarding implementation of the defensible space inspections, perhaps for Anne or Mark. When an inspection occurs and recommendations are made to the property owner or they're required to do things, if they can't afford it, I'm supportive of these, by the way, of the proposal to have more income or functional requirements on applicants to the grant program. I think that's a responsible use of the money. But for people that can't afford it, I mean, I think there's property owners that want to do the right thing. They just, can't get it together to do it. So my question is, when those inspections are made and the follow-up checklist is provided to the property owner, are they provided with a person that they can, a list of contractors that they can pay to get these items done? Because some of the measures are really small, like the vents, but the vent could be way up on the near the roof line, right? So it's hard for them to get to. Or
That's a great question, and it's a concept that we're actually starting to build the framework for now. And I'll use vents as a perfect example. We feel that if we put out a request for proposals for contractors that are willing to be the go-to vent provider for the MWPA, we want to beta test this first, pick priority areas within the JPA, and basically when the resident gets their report that says, you need these vents. If we get enough people within your neighborhood that signs up for the vent replacement program, then we'll have the contractor come in, and through the cost savings of being able to do an entire street or an entire cul-de-sac and not having to go all over the county, that we anticipate about a 50% cut in pay or cut in costs. And that would be fully borne by the contractor rather than by the MWPA. And then if the person is eligible for grants, they would be able to submit for that grant. So that's going to be our first dip in the water to be able to connect our residents to contractors. What we're calling this the easy button, make this problem go away for me. And so we want to beta test it with the vents because of how important the vents are, and then put the savings on the contractor because they'll be able to get that cost savings by not having to drive across the county for one house at a time. And then it turns into a savings to our taxpayers, and it's not expending more Measure C money.
great, thank you.
Chief Tyler, go ahead.
Regarding the grants program on part of the, to be eligible, one of the slides showed that step one was it was required to have a full DSI inspection. Can someone just remind me what a full inspection is versus a non-full inspection?
Yeah, so all of Nevada's are full inspections, but because some of the other areas go like road by road and knocking on doors one by one, sometimes people aren't home to give them permission, so they'll perform an inspection that's a partial inspection or street view, and that's just what they can see from the right-of-way passage to the house, basically.
But to be eligible, are those people in those areas that receive kind of that street view, they have to come back and do a full inspection before they get access to the grants? Is that correct?
Yeah, they would have to request a full inspection, and they would contact them directly for that.
Okay, perfect. And then with regards to the battery backups, I wasn't quite clear on why it's being pulled into a separate program. So I was wondering if you could give a little more explanation about that.
Yeah, so right now, because grants are connected with the defensible space inspections, only things listed on that report are grant eligible. But because the inspections aren't occurring inside of people's houses or garages, you guys don't know if the garage battery backup is already in existence. So there is no like checkbox for it. And it's kind of causing some issues right now based on kind of like eligibility and where that data kind of goes after someone resolves that. So we think it's a good idea to just kind of pull that, separate it, and simplify things, just have a one reimbursement form for that.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll go out to the public.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the last several presentations, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute yourself. And so there are no hands for public comment.
Thank you. Thank you to Chief Welsh, Stephen, and Maria for your presentations. We'll go on to the next one.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Steve, Maria, and Chief Welch. We are going to move on to discussing operational costs for MWPA, and Mark is going to be presenting this item.
And I will do my best to be on time, just like everyone else has been doing their best to be on time. And the rent is estimated to be just under $130,000. That includes the 3% cost of living adjustment that we have built into our lease, and then more tenant improvements for $25,000. And that's mostly will be spent in this room to increase our access and functionality as a hybrid meeting space, and specifically a hybrid classroom space. We really look forward to creating a space in here for classes that the instructor could be remote, the students could be remote, or vice versa, or all of the above. We continue to always need to keep our website updated and fresh. And we continue to make incremental improvements to our work plan portal. And then, of course, our communication strategy needs to be continually funded if we're going to continue with our outreach. Our Grizzly Corps Fellows, Maria Schmidt was a previous Grizzly Corps Fellow that we were able to recruit into the organization, but Elena Benching and Andrea Salinas now have proven vital. And to get 2 employees for $50,000 a year is vital, but also we really enjoy helping them on helping new people coming out of college and starting their professional careers. Training and education, $25,000. And I like to remind everybody that's not just for MWPA staff. We use that for training for member agency staff related to MWPA activities. Research and development and in emerging technologies. If something new and exciting comes out that we think we want to beta test, we want to be able to have some monies available for that. And then finally, a contingency for all work plan projects. This $125,000 is 10% basically of our overall core budget. This contingency pool is available for all of the projects, whether it's a San Rafael zone project or a JPA wide project. For an example, we were able to move $100,000 from contingency this year into the grant program to keep it flush. Now, these are targeting. Oh, yeah, thank you, Ann. Go ahead to the next slide. I forgot about that one. Zone Haven, we continue to have a $75,000 a year subscription for Zone Haven, covering MWPA's JPA jurisdiction. Tiburon and Belvedere has a separate contract with Zone Haven to provide coverage within their zone. But when Zone Haven looks at it, it's just one full complement for Marin. And then instead of parsing out the fire aside subscription for our defensible space valuation program from the DSpace line item, we've been pulling it from the core so that we can keep that much more money going towards defensive space evaluations. And then these are budget targets for us. So if and these are the same line items that we had last year. So let's say research and development, we only spend $5,000 from this year's budget. We'll anticipate $20,000 rollover. So then the net impact to the 23-24 budget would be $5,000. So that would be more money that would be able to push back out to the 5 zones.
Great, thank you, Mark. I'm going to go ahead and launch into my items here. So thinking about environmental compliance and how to support projects as they're being implemented in the field. I'm taking a look at expenditures for this current fiscal year and trying to project out for next fiscal year. Without knowing what core projects are being proposed for this next fiscal year, I've made some estimates and we can adjust as we go and we have a better idea for what's being included in the work plan. Assuming say 10 new core projects throughout the JPA area, I've budgeted about $20,000 per project for environmental compliance for a total of $200,000. Some projects we've seen revisions to, and so needing to file another notice of exemption for certain projects in order to accommodate any future changes to existing projects. I've budgeted $10,000 per project there. for up to 5 project changes. For the Novato project, that included eucalyptus tree removal within riparian areas. We needed to go work with Department of Fish and Wildlife for permitting. I've budgeted up to 2 permits for next year's projects. We spend a lot of time meeting with stakeholders, regulatory agencies, partners, various member agencies, and boards, committees, and a variety of different stakeholders. And so I've budgeted about $150 for that work, and that's pretty consistent with what has been spent this year, or what will be spent this year. And then I've added a new line item here for just kind of top high-level desktop review of project areas for steep slopes and potential identification of areas that would need mitigation to prevent erosion or slope stability issues. I'd also like to make sure we're budgeting to support project implementation. Once we have the environmental compliance in place for all of these vegetation management projects, we still need to continue to comply with environmental compliance requirements as we implement. So I've budgeted for a variety of tasks that would be ongoing as long as we're continuing to implement projects in the field, including nesting bird surveys, cultural resources surveys wherever there's a high sensitivity area, and botanical surveys, depending on where those projects are located and the likelihood of finding something in those areas. We also have a little bit of rollover from last year or the current 22-23 environmental compliance budget. I'm also proposing to use a portion of that budget to help support the resident grant program. And so with those considerations, we'd knock off about $100,000 off this budget for a total of $670. This is a breakdown of these items, just to give you an idea for where that funding would be going in a relative sense. Additionally, I'd like to explore bringing on 2 positions for vegetation management, and these 2 positions would be paid in part by core JPA-wide funding, but then in addition would be funded by project budgets to support project implementation in the field. The Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break is one very large 38-mile long shaded fuel break being implemented in the field. We were heavily involved in all of the coordination, the right to enter process, the outreach to residents, managing crews in the field, managing consultants in the field to do botanical surveys, cultural resource surveys, nesting bird surveys, etc. We have another very large shaded fuel break coming online sometime in the next year, and that's the Novato shaded fuel break, and that's 60 miles long. So both will be implemented concurrently. We've also supported other projects in the field and managed our vegetation management specialist who does the chipper program, Steve Peters, managed the implementation of work along Highway 1 in Muir Beach. So there's definitely going to be a need out there. I recognize that various member agencies are also trying to staff up, including Novato, in order to support that project. But we'd like a little bit of flexibility so that we're not caught flat-footed once we're out there in the field implementing projects. In addition, we are bringing on a consultant to do GIS work for us, and that includes building a GIS program. We have a lot of different consultants doing various GIS work for us, various studies. We have work happening in the field being tracked through polygons and various apps. We'd like to make sure that it's all integrated and that because so much of the work that we do needs to be tracked with spatial data and needs to be communicated using spatial data, we really need to have a team on board who can help build that program and communicate what we're doing out to the public. So that's it for me. It's 11:45, and that means we have some time for questions. I also want to recognize that we have other items on the agenda in case for committee reports, but I don't believe we have too much time that we need to spend on that. Happy to take any questions. Yes.
We'll start with Krista.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. And a question about the $150,000 for the budget for meeting, coordination of meetings. I think it was regarding CEQA and stuff like that. So that would not be existing staff. That would be above and beyond the existing staff that's budgeted, and who would be doing that work? Where would that money be going?
That would be a variety of different tasks. We meet with environmental stakeholders twice a month. We meet with the Coastal Commission. We meet with County Planning Department to plan projects and to coordinate on a variety of issues. We've got CEQA legal staff advising us every step of the way to make sure we are crossing our T's and dotting our I's. This would cover a variety of different tasks that don't necessarily get charged to a specific project. Last year, we created an environmental compliance manual, which is available for all of the member agencies to use. So that was a big cost that we won't have next year. So it may be that our costs are a little lower next year. So those are generally the costs, anything that doesn't fall into a particular project budget.
So it's above and beyond existing staff, which are budgeted elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's for all those extras.
It's for the Panorama staff time or Sequoia staff time for our contractors who are our CEQA contractors that we have on staff to pay for their time.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, it's our Remy Moose Manley representation.
Chief Tubbs.
Excuse me, and a question on the GIS mapping. So I believe MWPA is not a member of Marin Map. Is that correct? You are a member.
We are now.
And so is there any linkage in that proposal to Marin Map, whether that is on the labor side and or the integration of the GIS data into Marin Map?
Yes, absolutely. And that was included in the request for proposals that we circulated recently. And Marin Map is part of our selection team.
Chief Tyler.
Thanks. So this is for Mark. Mark, regarding the TIs for the room that we rent, is that room also, is that just MWPAs, they get it exclusively? Or is that, space that gets rented out also to the other uses from the county?
Great question. There we go. Great question. Testing 1, 2.
Uh-oh.
Anybody else?
Can't hear you.
No, it was because I unmuted this. All right, are we good now? Give me a thumbs up on the screen there, please. All right, thanks, guys. You would think after 4 meetings in this room this month, I would have figured out that I should not have unmuted myself on my computer. So I apologize for the feedback. So the space that we have here, are you talking to specifically the meeting room that we're in right now, Chief?
Yeah, I mean, if we're my point is this, if we're going to do TIs to the county property and they also use it for other purposes, or is it just us, solely us?
It is just for MWPA's use. The county doesn't have access to use this space. Saris Regis, who's the property manager, doesn't have access to the space without our permission. However, we have been promoting this space to our member agencies to use. For example, the fire prevention officers have been using this now once a month for their space, for their meeting space. The D-Space Coalition will be using this as their classroom space. The fire chiefs are starting to meet in here. DC3 is starting to meet in here. So we see this as a resource for all of our member agencies. Since, quite frankly, the county, we as a county government agency struggle to have a large, well-designed classroom / meeting space that's available. So we have been scheduling through Martina and making the space available for our member agencies.
Okay, I just think there it would be nice if there was some sort of cost recovery when it's loaned out to other agencies so that we can, get reimbursed for this cost. These improvements are making the room more valuable. And, I don't know whether or not we can get some money to recover some of those things.
We attempted that, and the lease did not allow for subletting. So we weren't able to charge member agencies. However, if the agency that's using the room is using the technology and want to have the full suite of being able to zoom in on individual speakers, they need to have a contract with Marin TV, and then Marin TV comes in and facilitates the electronics for them, and then they pay Marin TV directly rather than the MWPA paying.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I got it. And then just my other question, I guess, was for Ann. One first as a comment, I'd almost rather see the unspent monies with the CEQA stuff, held and rolled over to future CEQA, like Mark was saying, there'd be a savings that way, than redirecting it into the grants, which I think there's a ton of money going into grants, and there's an ask for an increase on that. So I don't know if I would recommend doing that. And then with regards to the two positions, working to help on the shaded fuel breaks for, I guess, the Ross Valley and Nevada, it seems to me that money should come out of those agencies' core funding, and which is what we've been trying to do to make sure that we've got the right amount of people coordinating and processing those. So I don't know how I would feel if I was another agency seeing our shared core funding spent towards a particular agency's projects. It's my thought or comment on that.
Great. Thank you for those questions. With regard to the grant program was proposed at a certain level last fiscal year, and the budget was reduced as in response to concerns from the operations committee regarding budget for the grant program. It became quite popular and quickly ran out of funding, and so it looked like the environmental compliance budget for 22-23 was not going to be used completely, and so the grant program really needed some additional funding, and so that's why we were thinking that this would be a good opportunity to move some funding over to make sure that the grant program could continue. With regard to vegetation management, it would be up to the member agency to determine whether or not they wanted to use those positions to help implement projects. And if that does not, for example, Novato is fully staffed and able to implement the greater Novato shaded fuel break, then there's no need to use those vegetation management specialists for that purpose. A portion of those positions, 30% would be paid through core funding, because a significant portion of the work that any of us do aren't billable to any particular project. And so we wanted to allow for some overall kind of project management and coordination.
Example is building next year's work plan.
Mark just shared an example, of course, is all the work that goes into building the following year's work plan, et cetera. So happy to answer any more questions about that.
Not seeing any questions in the room. Any questions on Zoom? Let's move out to the public.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the last two presentations, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 if you're joining us by phone. And there are no hands, sir.
Well, a big thank you to all of our presenters today. Thank you guys for all the work that you've put into these proposals. We'll move on to item 8, committee reports. And do we have a report from the Advisory Technical Committee?
The Advisory Technical Committee, unless there's anybody I'm missing on the attendees, does not have a report. And I'll just say that during the last meeting on March 1st, also 10 to noon, committee members heard the same presentations, give or take a few details, and the ad hoc subcommittee has begun meeting to discuss proposals.
Any update from the Citizens Oversight Committee?
A member of the Citizens Oversight Committee let me know that they didn't have any updates or questions for us today, but I do see some members in the audience who are welcome to pipe in if I've got that incorrect.
Not seeing anyone from the audience and also no major reports. I think we'll move on to item number 9. Committee members' requests regarding future agenda items. Any future agenda item requests?
I'd like to suggest one, if only you guys want to do this, and that is the conversation we've had regarding the abatement fund from the D-Space budget. It is listed in the JPA language as a option. And when we first started down the path, we assumed it was a requirement of the JPA language. When we dug into the language more, it's clear that it's an option. And I think maybe agendizing this topic for a future ops committee meeting, if the member agencies at the operations level feel that they want to discontinue the abatement program, then we can make that recommendation to the board. I'm sure the board would follow the recommendation of their ops committee. And so I recommend that as a future agenda item, if you guys want that.
I would support that.
I would as well. Thank you, Mark. One additional item I want to bring up very quickly is just a review of our bylaws at the operations committee level. There's some minor changes that need to be made. Anything else? Okay, we'll open up the floor to public comment for number 9.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. And so there are no hands.
Item 10, adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
First and second, and that adjourns the meeting. And by my calendar, we'll be meeting again 10 a.m. April 12th, 2023. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's correct.
All right, sounds good. Thank you all for a wonderful meeting.
Great job, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.